Hi, I'm Mike from Hitchin Farm Working Horses, and today we're going to be talking about breast collar harness, brawler harness and Amish workhorse harness and their uses. Right, so we're going to use Roger today, our 9-year-old cob stallion, and we're just going to put different sets of harness on him and possibly Opal in a minute as well, just to show you the pros and the cons. So this is a light, cheap set of breast collar harness. You'll have to excuse it, it's second hand and it's pretty old. So if you're starting out, this is a really nice set because when you're long lining, so you're just walking on the ground and you've got your reins in either hand, what you can do is have your bridle on, put your long reins onto his bit like normal, through the shaft loops, and then out to you where you're stood. And what you'll find is it's a really good practice for the horses to be out there, and you can long rein up and down the road and in the field or wherever you want really, and it'll just keep those reins out of the way and they're not going to get caught around anything or tangled. And if you want to do a little bit of carriage driving and you're just getting into it, this is really what we would recommend, is a nice light set. This harness will come in webbing, biophane and leather, and it really depends how much care and treatment you want to give to your harness as to which, and cost. Leather's normally much more expensive, much more difficult to keep clean and maintain, whereas the biophane is a little bit cheaper normally and it's much harder wearing. Another downside with this harness is they never put anywhere to hang your traces. So even though a lot of people will put them under there and hold them, if that horse shakes or anything, there's a good chance it's going to slide down. They're going to stand all over it and pull their harness around, which is pretty inconvenient really. Because this breast collar has got a narrow strap, what you're going to find is that when you put in more and more weights behind the horse, that's going to put more and more pressure on its skin and its muscles. So really this is when we're talking about upgrading to something a little bit chunkier. So if you're thinking of upgrading and you're thinking, oh, we've done carriage driving, but now we want to go on to something like chain harrowing, logging, cultivating, you name it. We need something that's a little bit chunkier, because what you're going to find is this is going to restrict your horse's movement of its shoulders. And generally, this harness is a bit odd. It's got a ring, but normally you have a buckle here with a pin. You've got to be really careful with the buckle and the pin with your trace for it, because you've got a good chance of, if you put something heavy on it, that it's going to pull that buckle through and your horse is going to go off without whatever it is you're trying to drag. Also with chain harrowing, with anything like this, I just don't recommend it, because what you find is, because of the vibration that it causes, it's going to tear the stitching out of here. So really at this point you've got to think about upgrading to what we'd call a brawler. So this is the upgrade now. So what we've done is we've put the brawler in. We've still got the same breast collar harness behind, which is fine. And what you find is you've got this nice big buckle. Everything is just a little bit heavier duty, and also you've got a much bigger surface area than you would with a breast collar, that horse can really lean in and it can start using its scapula, its shoulder to pull, which is really nice. And this is really a halfway house between a breast collar or a breastplate and a full working collar. And really I've seen, especially in Germany, they even plough with these. And it's up to you which traces you use, whether you start to use chain at this point if you are doing a lot more chain harrowing and logging, or whether you still use a heavy duty biophane trace. It's entirely up to you. But again, if you want to do a bit more chain harrowing and sledge work, this is what we would start recommending, something a little bit heavier duty and just something a bit comfier for your horse to really lean into and work. We don't really use a lot of brawlers or breast collar harness with what we do, because it's just what we do is just a little bit too heavy duty for it. Right, so we're going to move on to the Amish harness, which is what we predominantly use here at Hitchin Farm for all of our heavy work, and even it is a little bit heavy for the carriage driving, but again, it's a very versatile set of harness so that we can use it for carriage driving. So the slight disadvantages of the two previous harnesses is the fact that it's a little bit slow harnessing. And again, for hobbyists that are just going out for a bit of a pootle with their horse and cart, it's not the end of the world. But for us, because, you know, as you've seen on our videos, we're using teams of 6, teams of 8. Really, efficiency of harnessing, getting that horse hitched up and out, doing the job is really important. Start with the collar. The collar's going to go on upside down. When it's at the top of the neck, we're going to roll it round. So it's not as tight when you're rolling it around, you know that collar's not going to fit. So next, you've got the hames, the back band, the friction. Fairly similar setup to the breast collar and roller harnesses that we've seen. With these solid farm hames, you're going to sit in the gully of this collar, and we're going to get this strap really tight. You don't want that popping off when we're working. Next is your neck yoke strap. I'm going to clip in there. We're going to pull his mane out while we're there. We're going to put all the harness back, and don't be too gentle at this point because you want that collar to sit back onto his scapula. Pull the tail out. On back here, I'm going to do the other side, the quarter strap. So the neck yoke between the front legs and onto this quarter strap, if you can see it on this side. Quarter strap on this side. And a girth. The girth is left pretty loose. I want a fist between the body of the horse and the girth. And the only thing we're going to do is hook this tray clip, it's just popped off. So this is a little bit more expensive than the other two harnesses that we've put on, but what you'll find is it's really versatile. It will do everything from single carriage driving to teamwork, ploughing, cultivating, you name it, this harness will do it. It's really tough. This bioframe is really good. I'll be honest, this harness now is like 6 years old, and we've ragged it basically, and it's still just as good as when we bought it. And you see this clip here, which is the only thing that we actually change on the Amish harness. We got a swivel freeway locking carabiner, and this will go onto your neck yoke on either your carriage or your hitch cart or your wagon. What is normally on there is just an open clip. And basically, if anything is a clip like that there, they can clip their bits into it. That's why when we fit this harness, we turn all those clips in to face the harness. And yes, you can see it does rub the harness just a bit, but I'd rather it rub the harness than a horse catch its bit and bridle in there and rip it off or damage its mouth. So to change this harness from pairs set to a single set is really easy. What they've done is they've just made these are shaft loops. And what they do is they just clip in like that, and away you go. Normally what you find is, like I'll show you on this carriage here, we actually leave the shaft loops and the extra holdbacks on the shaft, so we can literally just pull this cart forward, put it on the horse. It should take you less than 30 seconds to get that horse hitched up, which is something that we really like with this system. And like I say, it's a little bit heavy for carriage driving, but again, it does it just fine. So just to recap, just to remember that this is workhorse harness for people that want to go out and work them. Even though it's fantastic harness, if you're in the UK and you want to do implement classes or showing your horse in harness, you're going to struggle to get this placed. Really, you're going to need like either an English set of harness or a leather set at least. We don't like leather personally because of the maintenance. We love the bioframe though. One of the things that we really like about the bioframe harness is that it doesn't cause as much friction as the webbing. So with young horses, if they're not half passing correctly in shafts or in traces when they're working, they're less likely to get little rubs on their legs than if we were using the webbing harness. So this is a clip that none of the other harnesses seem to have, and I can't for the life of me see why. And it's really important, to be fair, because what we can do is we can clip our traces in there. It keeps the traces up, keeps the horse safe so that we can go and have lunch or a cup of tea and come back. We know that horse and its harness will be absolutely fine. So this is the full field collar that the Amish make. So it's like your bog standard collar that they make. It's fantastic because it's got a huge amount of adjustment on both sides of it. So when, especially with cobs, because they will gain and lose weight quite rapidly, that we can adjust it accordingly to keep it really snug. Because when you're fitting collars for workhorses, you really want to think, like, instead of it being loose so it's not going to choke them, which is the misconception that most people have, you want it snug like a set of walking boots. I only want to get the flat of my hand between his windpipe and the collar itself. And what that stops is a lot of rotation in the collar and a lot of movement up and down. Because it's that movement up and down that will actually stop that horse and put pressure on its windpipe, and we don't want that. We want to make use of this huge surface area that this collar provides. And with these Amish collars, you can get extra pads that we use on all of our young horses to keep them really comfy as they're coming into work and they're starting to harden their shoulders up. And this is what they call a healing pad or a vinyl pad. And this is the one that we really recommend. We've got others that we're going to show you in a moment that there are on the market, but personally I think is a false economy. Also, having this collar pad will give you about a 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch more. So if your horse loses a little bit of weight, you can put that in there and it'll just take up a little bit more slack and keep your horse really comfortable when it's working, because that is the most important thing for these animals. So there's normally 3 different sets of pads that you can choose from. We've only got 2 here. So the vinyl ones, which are the ones that we really promote and recommend, what you find is it sheds the sweat instead of holding it, and it's much less likely to give your horse sore shoulders. And also, because it's like a wipe clean surface, what you find is there's nothing in there like grit or dirt or even like a bit of bramble that is going to get stuck in there and hurt your horse's shoulders. Now, a lot of people go for these pads because they are cheaper. You know, these are like about 5 to 10 quid a piece. They're more like £40 a piece. But what you find is with these, grit, dirt, hay, bramble, gorse will stick to this like a magnet. And it's very easy to ruin a horse's shoulders and completely put the animal off working if you do get rubbish caught in this collar pad. So personally, have a bit more expense, but save your horse. The third one that we don't have here, because I really don't like them, is the deer hair pads. And they've got felt on the outside, they've got deer hair in the middle. What you find, like the felt ones, they hold the sweat against that horse's shoulders. So when you go for lunch, that horse's shoulders are going to be still wet when you come back, and it's much more likely to get rubs. Whereas with these guys, what you find is after lunch, your horse's shoulders will be dry and they can carry on working just absolutely fine. Right, so I'll just quickly talk about his bridle. So I've tucked some of the floof out the way so that you can actually see his head. And a lot of people wonder why the Amish put the nosebands so high, whereas like our English nosebands would be either there or even maybe a little bit lower. And it is actually just to give space so that you can always keep your halter underneath. Because if you're working your horse, you never know when you need to, like, you know, pop and have a cup of tea, or, you know, stop for a chat with your neighbour. And, you know, have that halter on means that you can tie your horse up safely, it can have a rest, and you can do whatever you're doing for a moment. Also to mention that all of our horses, we train them without blinkers. The blinkers are the bits that cover their eyes, but we're going to do a whole video on that because it seems to be really controversial at the moment. Alright, so this is Opal, this is one of our best mares, and this harness is exactly the same as the one that Roger was wearing. The only difference is this is webbing. So we've had this harness now for 9 years, and it has been in everyday use, and I'm quite honest with you, a lot of the time if we're doing a lot of work and a lot of training, this harness just is left outside on the fence. This is our assistant, Blossom. She's now 18 months old, and I think she's about time that she probably started a little bit of education. Right. So, like I was saying, this is 9 years old, and what you can see is it does fray a little bit, and also with a young horse, you've got to be just a little bit more aware of what you're doing when you're doing your turns, because there's more chance that you just will get a little rub on your horse's legs because of the friction just by there. Again, this doesn't really happen with the Biofane harnesses often, and really when I started there was a massive difference in price between this and the Biofane harness, and now there's only about 150 quid difference. So personally I'd go for the Biofane and not the webbing anymore. I think the advantage is if you're in America, there's a lot of local harness makers, and it's much easier to go and source this. You'll be able to just go down to a local shop and buy it, and also it's a lot cheaper because you don't have to import it, whereas that's what we have to do in the UK. So at the moment, the Biofane, the nice easy to clean Biofane, whereas this is not easy to clean, it's costing about £1,300 for a set imported. And that really normally comes with a bridle, the full setup, a set of reins and a swingle tree. And like I said, this webbing stuff is probably 150 quid cheaper, but remember the prices are changing, especially at the moment, all the time, so you'll have to have a little look yourself. This Amish harness is also just a little bit harder to source in the UK, so for most hobbyists what you'll find is this harness will actually probably outlive your horse. That's how tough and durable it is. For us, what you find is every couple of years the collar will wear out. The collar is about 250 quid, give or take. So I'm quite happy to put those in the bin and not have them restuffed and buy a new one.
Mr. Moustache? You're eating your own hair. What are you doing? Silly.